Hello and welcome to Soul Guidance with Adriana. Today I wanted to talk to you about a wonderful subject for the summer solstice, but that of death. So, death in kind of our physical world, death in a spiritual significance, and the many deaths that we actually experience on a daily basis. So, first, I wanted to talk to you about why I'm making this video in the first place. I was watching Guns N' Roses' November Rain, the music video for that. And if you haven't seen it, probably stop the video and go see it because I'm going to talk about elements of it that it's kind of spoiler. So there is a theme actually of death and grief and loss all throughout this video. And it was when I saw this scene where they're at the graveyard and everyone's dressed in black and there's this very kind of, I don't know, impending looking priest sitting there in his black doing the funeral rites at the grave. And I thought, this is wrong somehow. I mean, I know that this fits in the narrative of the video, which is about, well, I won't tell you if you haven't watched it, but it fits in the narrative of the video, but death was portrayed as something really tragic and really bad. And I just thought, this isn't quite right. This really isn't quite right when we're looking at death from a more spiritual perspective. Death from a spiritual perspective is not something to be afraid of. It's not something to dread. It's not something to be worried about, actually. So let me start, I'll start big and then I'll go small. So death on the spiritual perspective really means the end of something, the big end of something, but that means the start of something new. There's energy is never created or destroyed, so something can't completely ever just stop or end. It has to evolve and change into something else. So that's really, really interesting to think about. So energy not being created or destroyed. If you think about a car crashing into a tree, the energy of that car moving and crashing into a tree actually all gets dissipated through the tree into sound, into the force of the tree on the car and vice versa, but that energy never goes away. So there's really no reason to be upset when you see death if you understand that principle. Energy never goes away. It transforms. Okay, so the energy that the car was traveling with, the speed, all of that got transformed when it hit the tree into sound, into warped metal. It didn't actually ever die or go away. And that's really what death is. Death is a transition to something else. Death is a transformation into something else. And if we think about it that way, we would actually kind of welcome death, because it means that we're growing, it means that we're changing. And so, there's personal deaths that we experience not only every day, but in important parts of our life. So, the death of every day is actually just the day itself. It dies when we go to sleep, it's reborn when we wake up, and then it dies again. And throughout your life, you have already experienced many deaths. Puberty is a kind of death because it is the death of childhood and the birth of that in-between phase, and then you'll have puberty into adulthood. That's another death. For me, going from student to professional was a kind of death, the end of being a student and then the birth of being a professional. Not that I stopped learning, but it's a different mentality altogether. Giving birth is actually a kind of death because you are one person before you give birth, and then the minute that child is born, you're a mother. You're something else completely. Your whole body, everything, your mind, all of that changes. Your psyche, and even it doesn't have to just be a mother, being a parent and at all. So being a father as well. Becoming a father is a kind of death. Changing jobs is a kind of death. And a lot of these times we're actually welcoming death, I don't know about you, but I could not wait to get out of puberty into adulthood. And the other thing, when I've changed jobs, it's because I wanted a new job. So where we get hung up on death is when it means the loss of someone else. Okay, when it means the loss of a loved one, That's where we get hung up on death. But if you understand that their energy never truly goes away, it transforms into something else. Okay? The other thing that we don't, no, let me stay on that thought a little bit more. Okay, so it depends on what you believe. I personally believe that our bodies are temporary, but our souls are eternal. So when one body dies, the soul is still going. There's part of us that is still going. And in a different sense, when you have a connection with someone and that person dies, that connection can never die, actually. It persists past the physical death of both you and that other person or that other being. It could be an animal. So that connection, that bond never dies. That's what actually lasts between us and the other side, is that bond. And you might say, well, if they're not here in the physical, then that bond can't ever deepen or keep growing. And I don't know if that's really true, you know. It's a different kind of growth that happens, because as you grow and deepen as a person, your capacity to love becomes more expansive and more inclusive. And so your love for that animal or that person could actually change. It could become even stronger once they're gone in the physical, from the physical. The thing that we miss about death is that when someone around us dies, that's actually a death for our being as well, our spiritual self as well. It's not just that they're leaving us, it's that we're literally going through a death ourselves. The time when they were with us and the time that they are not with us in the physical. So a lot of people talk about the death of a parent as being a really important milestone, isn't the right word, but event, a life-defining event when the parent dies. And so, or, you know, when a spouse dies or someone close to you dies, you're not the same after they leave. You're changed by their death, and so their death is actually also a living death for you too. The grief and the sadness and the loss of the physical presence is what makes death scary to us and sad to us, because we crave that physical presence. But if you can leave that physical presence, understanding that the physical presence isn't permanent and it's in a lot of senses not real, it's not real because it's not where our true energy lies. Our true energy lies with our soul. It gives you a little different perspective. I'm not saying that it makes the grief any easier or it makes the sadness any easier, but it does help to perhaps encourage your heart to expand. It's not like when someone dies, your part of your heart is cut off. In fact, your heart has the opportunity to expand even more, because they will live forever in that space. So, you know, the big thing with death, and the one aspect of that I haven't touched on, is the fear of the self dying, the fear of the ego dying. And, you know, for me, quite frankly, it's actually the pain of death that I'm more scared about than the actual death. You know, it's the pain right before the soul leaves the body that I'm not really wanting to go through. But there are people that are very afraid of death because they're afraid of not having a self anymore. They're afraid of that personality dying. And what I have to say is that it's really possible for your personality to die every single day. If you're on a path of growth, you're not the person you were yesterday. If you're not interested in growth, or if you know someone that's not interested in growth, it's very likely that they will be afraid of death because they don't want to change, because they're not willing to let go of something that is outdated for them. And that's just the thing. Death teaches us how to let go. There are so many things we want to hold on to: people, belief systems, memories, possessions. We want to hold on to these things because they make us feel safe. But the truth is, energy is always in motion. And so that means that there is a time when energy needs to be released, when we have to let go of energy, when we have to let go of something or someone. It's like reason or season, or I'll just say reason or season. Things come into your life for a reason. Things may come into your life for a season. Sometimes they come in for a lifetime, but usually it's a reason or a season. So when we look at nature, death is a natural part of nature. Sorry, that was really redundant. Nature and natural. But death is an intrinsic natural part. If we never had death, we'd have a problem. We would be even more congested on our planet than is what's healthy. And I feel like it's kind of tickling my memory that there's a myth from some culture, and I can't remember which one it is, where all of a sudden people can't die anymore and things can't die, and the planet becomes overcrowded and we have a different kind of crisis. But death is natural. Everything has a lifespan because the energy needs to move on to a new form. And when you're looking at when you're looking at it from an energetic point of view, nothing ever dies. The energy just moves into a different form. Okay, and like I said, I know this doesn't help the emotional attachment we may have, but it does give you a broader understanding of really how death is not only natural, but in some cases actually welcome. All right, because death means that we're moving into something new. Death means that we're becoming something else. Whether it's on this physical plane or in a different world or in a different dimension, it means that we're moving on to something new and that we've grown somehow. Sometimes, this is a personal experience, sometimes people choose to die or choose to transition, sometimes, because there are people around them that need to grow. And there are people around them that need to find out the truth. And so sometimes the soul, as an act of love, actually chooses to leave, chooses to die, chooses for the body to die, not the soul to die, for those around them, because the soul cares most about growth. And that's sometimes why, I don't have all the information on this, but that's sometimes why you see early deaths or deaths that seem premature. Sometimes, again, this is not a blanket thing, that the soul has actually seen that it's not going to learn everything. It's not going to be able to grow because of the choices that the human or the body is making. And so the soul says, okay, we need to transition. We need to restart. We need to move this energy in a different way. So the person will transition earlier than what it seems they should be doing so that the soul can release that energy and start again. So death is always tied to rebirth. And I think if you can consider that, death is always tied to rebirth. Death does not exist as an absolute grim reaper end of time. I think that image is not helpful for us. Really, death being associated with the grim reaper, that's not really, there's part of that that's really misleading because it looks like an ending. But the thing is, a reaper is something that harvests, right? It's really something that's about growth. Something has grown to its full maturity and it needs to be released. But when you release an old harvest, you're making room for the new harvest. Okay, so death and rebirth are always tied together. So if you find yourself confronted with some kind of death, a death of a loved one, or perhaps going through your own kind of death, watching someone else go through a death around you, keep that in mind. Death is always tied to rebirth. And watch out for what that rebirth is asking. I want to thank you for staying with me and for experiencing these ideas with me. I think it's so important that we have a dialogue about this, and it's really important that we understand death as something not to be afraid of, but to welcome with an open heart, because it's through that open heart that we really learn how to grow and really learn how to rebirth ourselves into something even better. So I'll catch you next time.